So, well, welcome to the behind the scenes at a con panel. And so, I think what I'd like to do is have the panelists introduce themselves and kind of give our audience here a little bit of information about where this experience comes from that you'll be using to tell these stories. But you don't have to say exactly where con that these stories will come from in order to protect the not so innocent, but feel free to say so if you'd like to.
My name is Rebecca Hewitt. I'm from Albuquerque, New Mexico, and on a regular basis I run the costume contest at MileHiCon and also help with the art show. At Dinvention, when it was the last Dinvention, I did a costume exhibit in the hall, and 2 years from now in San Jose I am in charge of all curated exhibits, which will be interesting, brand new territory for me. So.
I'm Dan Peake, and my biggest qualification for being on this panel was that I was, in fact, received at a convention, this convention, about 40 years ago. In the last 17 years, I've been working various conventions. I helped to start NondesCon, one of the local anime conventions, and worked that for a very, very long time until I retired. And since then I've just sort of been contributing and attending and showing up when I'm told to show up at various other events.
Yes, well, I'm Dee Beadham, and even before Dan Peake can even remember, I was actually, a couple of years, running once as a co-director of MileHiCon. Actually, I've attended many other conventions. Slowly the various stories and legends, seep into your mind and so forth.
All right, and I am Nikki Ebright. I forgot to introduce myself. I have volunteered at many of the local conventions over the last not quite decade, and I currently run the Myths and Legends convention, and I'm also the con chair for the Denver WesterCon, which will be happening in 2018. So there are my chops. So one of the first questions I wanted to ask our panelists is, tell us a story about some large fun you may have had, something along the lines of catastrophes or other large changes that have had to come about in various ways. Anyone want to jump in with a fun story?
A catastrophe that's fun? No, I have never encountered. What you're talking about is hearing about somebody else's catastrophe, and then it's a lot more fun.
Yes, this is the Schadenfreude period part of the...
I mean, it doesn't even matter if you're sorry for them. It's still a lot more fun than if it's yours.
I think as a rule, especially when you get to larger conventions like Worldcon, there is always, every year, the panel from hell. And it's something that, despite the organizers' best attempts to create and populate with rational, reasonable people and an interesting subject, just goes to, I'm looking around, goes to hell in a handbasket.
Tell us the story.
Okay. Well, there was one panel where the panelists didn't quite seem to know what they were supposed to be discussing, and there was a little discussion on what to be discussing, and one of the panelists kind of stormed off and walked out at one point. Now, I've never been privileged enough to attend any of these. I get them kind of secondhand. And then somebody else on the panel says, I have a friend who's a folk song about that, and invited their friend up front to sing their folk song, which is was bad. And then there was this last year where the moderator of a panel took it over and decided to soapbox about how women were ruining science fiction. And
was that Worldcon this year?
That was Worldcon this year. He promptly got kicked out of the convention. And I think that happened on I think that was a Friday morning or a Friday early afternoon panel, and he was gone.
Yeah.
And wasn't the panel something about like?
It was talking about short stories. It was a panel that was supposed to discuss the state of short stories in science fiction writing today. and suddenly there was mention of special snowflakes and pearls and along the vein, and basically along the vein of how women are ruining science fiction for all, and the other panelists couldn't get him to stop. Several people walked out, and in the end, he got shown the door. He got, I love the way Spider Robinson put it in one of his novels, he got an invitation to the world. So it's great when you don't have a panel from hell, but yeah, those are the catastrophes and the nightmares when you have to deal with as a, the panel from hell.
It's too bad we don't have Karamda on the panel, because she could tell the story about somebody setting themselves on fire at her convention. She gets a call on the radio, and they said, "Do you know your brother's on fire?" No, wait, no, your brother's been put out. The fire's been put out. She's like, "Wait, what?" She tells the story much better. So, Dan, you seem like you had something.
I've got so many things,
I know.
and I don't want to some of them are bad, and I don't want to necessarily drag down the mood, but I can tell some stories of conventions I've been at, attending, and some stories of conventions I've worked. The most entertaining one was many, many years ago, back in the mid-90s. There's an animation convention down in Texas called Project ACON. And so as you can imagine, an AnimeCon runs a lot of video, runs a lot of things that require electricity, so that when a tornado drops a roof on the power lines, that kind of interrupts your con. So the power went out middle of the day Saturday. The dealer's room was in the middle of the building with no windows. So when the power went out, the dealer's room went pitch black.
Oh.
That was exciting.
Flashlights.
Yeah, flashlights, and they didn't have cell phones, they had to find flashlights. What else? So you suddenly have this MediaCon and nothing for anyone to do. Everyone's trapped in the hotel, the AC is off, and it's Dallas in July. Yeah.
Which year was this again?
ACON, at the height of ACON?
Possibly. I'm not aware that ACON had a...
Well, at one point, they were routinely bringing in nearly 3,000 to 4,000 people into the convention. So if it was about that time period...
It's very likely, yeah. We actually made commemorative t-shirts. It was that bad. I should have brought it with me. Yes, after 6 hours of no entertainment, nothing to do but sit on the floor in the hallways where the sun was shining so you could see your cards to play Magic the Gathering, or read, whatever that's about. Finally, some of us just got a little crazy, and we started a parade down the hallways, and started marching and chanting and various things. And there was like a dozen of us, and then we're walking through the hallways, and then suddenly I turn and I look back, and there's like 50 of us. Oh, well, let's keep going. So we just kept on going, marching through the hotel, and finally we come out to the middle, and it was basically a big square, and in the middle was a pool and a hot tub area, and some of the suites looked out onto it. And so we go out into the middle, and we're chanting and making all sorts of noise, and we've got squirt guns and whatnot, and then the suite door slides open, and there's the convention director. And I was like, well, that brought that to an end, okay, because this was fun while it lasted. And she comes out and she starts throwing candy to the group. Chanting and dancing, ah! And at a certain point, something changed, something broke, and the parade marched on without us. And we stood there looking at like the dozen of us that started it. Like, yeah, I think we're gonna be okay. About an hour later, the lights came back on. But that was a singular experience. 7 hours of a media convention with no power. And I can't even, and Mary, I think it was Mary, the convention director later told us, thank you for saving the convention with something, because people were going a little crazy. So we sort of channeled the crazy and brought it out, and she threw the candy at it. But yeah, that was a good one.
Which year was that?
I want to say 96 or 97. I'm trying to remember. It's on my T-shirt.
So you guys are still in the hotel in the airport then, huh?
I don't think so. We drove, so it might have been in the airport.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it was many years ago. It was a good. It was a good con.
I've heard catastrophe stories, but on the other hand, you have to be pretty impressed by science fiction conventions, especially the larger ones. I mean, it's a pretty large enterprise for people to put together over generally a whole year with no serious expectation of remuneration. I went to a library convention one year because I'm a professional librarian, and I was looking over at the guy who's doing registration. He says, how do they get you to come here every year? He said, they pay me. Oh! Now I do recall the one story about, years back in listening to Al Ellis at a MileHiCon saying, if you run a WorldCon, now the first one you won't make a profit at, and maybe the second, but after that, after that you just know what you really know what it is that you need to heavily insure, I suppose. But I mean, it is really remarkable, and. There is nothing conventions are not horrendous things. It is possible to volunteer for small things or large things. I remember when I was running a convention, as usually happens, somebody or other says, nope, can't do that. And so we had a trivia ball with no one who would volunteer to do it all. And so I sort of pieced it together like a crazy quilt. Dave Anderson was willing to be, quiz master, and somebody else was willing to do logistics. I got my mother to create the questions, which was not as ridiculous as it sounds because she was in the club too. But yes, volunteer. I mean, you can always sneak out. Many others have done that. Have you a few horror stories, Rose, that you are willing to share?
I have interest, I don't know if I call them horror stories.
Well, tell an interesting story.
Okay, many people have come to MileHiCon more than a couple of years. So you old guard. Okay, do you remember the year of the plague? Oh my gosh, that was a while back. So that was the year that Sherry Tepper was going to be our guest of honor, and Connie Willis was Toastmaster, and Kathy Walker from Starfest was our fan guest, and our artist guest was Erin McKee. So we're trundling along and it's all good and all that, and then like 2 weeks, maybe 3 weeks before the con, I hear from Sherry, and she says, I'm not going to be able to come. God rest her soul. She had like severe rheumatoid arthritis. She'd gone to the doctor, and they said, you know that medication you're taking? Stop, right now. You're bleeding internally. Okay. So she stopped taking it and became wheelchair bound. And she planned to drive up from where she lived in Santa Fe. So I'm like, okay, so 3 weeks, and we have no guest. Okay, but she said, no, I did write my speech. It's all written, I can send it up for someone else to get going. Thank you, definitely do that. And I'm like, oh my God. So I called Ed Bryant. You guys may know Brian, but he's our patron saint and guiding light. And I said, Ed, so who could we get at the last minute? Not as a replacement, maybe. He said, no, I want a special guest. And he said, I think we could get Santos to drink, who at the time was living in this country, as opposed to Thailand. So he got hold of him and he says, yes, I can do it. And I have to buy my ticket tonight because tomorrow the prices will go way up. So he did it and he came in and it was all good. And we found someone who had done escort work for Planned Parenthood to read Sherry's speech. And you really needed someone who could believe that because a lot of her speech was about the evils of overpopulation because she was the director of Rocky Mountain Planned Parenthood for years till she retired. So come the guest of honor speeches, I'm running around trying to see what's going on. And as I run by Connie in the restaurant, she says, Rose, I almost missed the guest of honor things. I thought they were at 11, but I see they're at 10:30, but I'll be there. Okay. And she's all dressed in black with a little veil. I forget why, but it turned out to be really appropriate. And so then I'm running around, and Santow comes up to me. He's kind of a joker, but he comes up to me. Wait, don't do it. He was on antibiotics. He had left them in California. He could not talk. And I'm kind of like, all right. I look around. This is where being around forever and knowing everybody and who you can bully, and Jimmy, and who's good at this, going, Susan Kreitz, who was a kind of a friend of Santow. Santo, you're gonna have to mime your speech. And Susan will interpret it for you. And Susan, okay. When she gets up. And then someone comes up to me and said, Erin McKee is in the art show flat on her back. What? Yeah. So I go in there, and she was our artist guest, and she's lying flat on her back in the art show. Someone who I don't even remember who it was now was going, they're an empathic healer. They are going to like try and fix her. Jesus, don't tell me this empathic healing nonsense. I'm a fan, my brains aren't dribbling out my ears. But whatever, she was like in bed. I don't know what was wrong with her stomach, whatever. She was just lying, can't do anything. Okay, so he's laying on hands practically and chanting. I don't know what he was doing, but it was not working. And I'm like, okay, well, could someone else give your speech for you maybe? I could get somebody like Perry Charlafoo who's standing right here, not running away. He could give your speech for you. And she said, well, I was gonna wing it. Okay. Good. So I'm like, Perry, so can you give her a speech? But she didn't really have a speech. And we could just like talk about her art. And Perry's eyes get even bigger than Santa's had, but he'd already kind of committed when I threw myself out of it. So he was done. So I'm like, okay. So I run out, and we're like, this is probably like 15 minutes to guest of honor speeches. I see Kathy Walker. I run up to her and go, Kathy, you're feeling okay, aren't you? And she goes, yes. Okay, good, because everyone else was dropping like flies. And he goes, what? So in the end, you know, we had Connie in her total black outfit with the hat and the veil, which turned out to be so appropriate. And she was even saying, they were like dropping like flies.
Bring out the dad.
Yeah. We had Santo, who's kind of going,
That's only Santo can.
oh yeah. And Susan interpreting as only Susan can. We had Sherry Tepper's speech read by Margaret Denny. And then we had Perry, who had a piece of her art that he, you know, put out on a, well, first he put up a thing, he says, so here's what Erin looks like, and he drew a big thing with little X's for eyes. Like, okay, and then Rose comes up to me and is saying, can you give her speech? And he's like, and he's big O's for his, you know, and so it was short, and then he put up a piece of her art and talked about it, how great it was, and we all got through it. It was fine, you know, just kind of, we got through DonnerCon. But, you know, some of those are more memorable, really, than the times that go well, as long as it's not something hideous.
Wait, that wasn't the same year as Donner.
Oh, no, it was not the same year. No, we had all our guests, except for our Toastmaster at DonnerCon, and that was because Ed was saving us money and went home and got snowed in.
Well, tell the story of DonnerCon.
No, you guys are in the paper.
Come here, Rose.
At least,
Pull up a seat, come on.
come on, you were at DonnerCon, weren't you, Daniel?
Was
Rose,
I?
come on up.
How old was I?
Well,
No, I was at that con, and I think I was about 7.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Great. The only thing is you have to introduce yourself.
I'm Rose Beatum. I think,
ruler of all she surveys.
yeah, but I can't survey because I don't have a protractor. No, I think at this point, yes, definitely, because you're too young. And you're too Texan.
Nice to hear.
No, you're too Texan, because you had gone from home. I think at this point in the universe, I am the only remaining person who has been to all 48 MileHiCons.
Yeah.
I started very young. Now, there's a rumor about Daniel here. Do you want to share that? Can I share
Actually,
that?
I shared it right off the
Yeah.
bat. My mother and father, who were con chairs 1976, held me up in front of the con and said, he's exactly 3 months old. And years later, when I was running conventions, I was like, how did you have the energy? And she just said it was a very different world then.
But, is anyone here who was at DonnerCon?
It's MileHiCon, but it's called DonnerCon because of what happened.
Yeah.
So that was a crazy con for me because I was doing programming then too, but I also work at the Denver Art Museum. And that was the year that the Friday of MileHiCon, we were having the big staff opening for the education center. And I was on the committee for that and had helped put together the slideshow and blah, blah, blah. So I'm out at the hotel, back when we were at the 6th Avenue Sheraton.
Lakewood, I believe.
6 Union Lakewood, yeah. So I was out there during the day, and then I'm going, oh shit, I gotta get back to the party. It's one of the few opening ceremonies I've missed. And so I drive out there and watch people laugh at the thing and have a good time. I'm like, I gotta get back. Plus I have to pick up the cake at King Supers because that was a year that Songtown was here, and it was the 13th anniversary of Vampire Junction. So Timmy Valentine, the vampire rock star, was 13 years old, and we made a cake with like Timmy on the cover, like that. So I drive to King Supers, and it's starting to snow. Okay. I go in, I get the cake, I come back out, it's snowing, it's continuing to snow. I get on the road.
As an example of Rose's delegation, Rose delegated Dee and I, who are from Texas, and so the idea of driving on snow is a totally bizarre and strange experience. To go up to Boulder when it's beginning to snow.
Oh,
You got the beer, right?
Well, it was not snowing then, but as we came back, it began, the first flakes were falling when we passed Broomfield.
And yeah,
That's
that
at the
is-
Theater of the Vampires beer, right?
yeah. And then I'm from Texas, so it's like, oh my God, please no one pass me. I have no clue what the hell I'm doing, and if I stop, I don't know where I'm going to land. Because getting
Yeah.
snow on the road.
Oh, yeah.
Denver writes, it's like, yeah, BFD. I'm from Houston. Snow's a strange, bizarre experience.
Yeah. But yeah, that was the other part of the party is they had Theater of the Vampires beer that year, and I thought, oh, we have to have that, you know, so yeah, I sicked them on it. But so I get on, normally would take 6th Avenue, but it was coming down so hard, I thought I'm gonna get on Colfax and kind of, and I got all the way to the hotel, and I parked, and I went in, and I did not move my car again until Monday, because the next morning, when we got up, we were completely snowed in. And every time I would walk by registration, so we'd go, Rose, and I'd go over and I'd pick up the phone, and the third time, and every time after that, I would go, hi, where are you stuck? Where are you snowed in? I mean, people were canceling right and left. Ed, our Toastmaster, to save us money, bless his little pea-picking heart, had gone home Friday night and couldn't get back Saturday. So we had no Toastmaster until Sunday when we plowed the roads and he showed up. But I would go from room to room to room to see how my panels were going. And the one that I just thought was, if there was like 2 people, 3 people had shown up, just start. Everyone was canceled. Everyone's stuck in their place in Louisville and Brookfield and Lakewood for that matter, you know, they couldn't get out. But the one that I thought was just perfect for that con was, I stuck my head into this one room, and Daniel Dvorkin, who was around still now he's Dr. Daniel Dvorkin. I've watched him be from a skinny kid now to doctor who still loves dinosaurs. And he was the only person of the 5 who were supposed to be on the panel who showed up. And I stick my head in, and he had everybody draw chairs in a circle, and they were just talking away like gangbusters and going, yes! And what I've heard subsequently, we start calling it DonnerCon, because all the hotel people couldn't get home either. So it's like, you know, you go down to the restaurant, they were no longer letting you order off the menu. It's just whatever we have, putting it out, buffet. You know, and people started, it's like, yeah, that's those fans look like good eating, you know. So it's like, okay.
Actually, the story was that Connie Willis had gone and sacked the candy machine just in case.
That wasn't the story. I caught her. I was out asking for change.
Connie planned. She was once almost stranded at a hotel that was holding a con, and they said, oh, by the way, you know, it's bank holiday tomorrow, everything will be closed. She said, you must drive me right now to the store. And they're going, what? I said, I don't have a car. We're 15 miles from the store. You know, food tomorrow. You must drive me. And she had to beat these college kids who were running the con over the head. But
Yeah, it's my understanding that the hotel ran out of food.
there was still stuff. There was stuff.
And people were basically, who had snacks, everybody's like, hey, what you got?
No, there was always
That's true,
food,
yeah.
but some people would kvetch because they wanted to order off the menu. But what you did have is the first day, you found a little piece of paper slid under your door saying, if you want new, fresh towels or you know, sheets, please come to the desk for them.
You know, it's like
and
the manager was pouring coffee in the restaurant, you know. But I have, since then, one thing I heard from a couple of the authors, and it warms the cockles of my heart, was they said, you know, I always remember that con because there was like these groups of authors who'd be talking, and they all seemed like they were friends and they knew each other, and I didn't feel like I could go over. But they said, so many people didn't show up, it just blew all that out of the water, and that's when they got to meet a lot of people and found out, it's like, really, I could have gone up there before, but I was afraid to. But they said, I met people, and now they're my good friends, and those are the things that I really like about working at the cons like this. I mean, I could tell you stories of people who met their spouses at cons, you know, people I suborned into programming that thought they couldn't do programming, but I plotted and got them to do it, and it turned out it was good for them. It was good for them. Yeah. And I'm not a mom, so I work it out here.
So yeah, and in case there's anybody in the audience who doesn't know, conventions are run by volunteers. I mean, it's not, like in very rare instances, like some large conventions like a Comic-Con, but might have a payroll. But pretty much, I mean, this is all volunteers. We just do this out of the kindness of our hearts and
insanity of our
brains,
brains.
yeah, pretty much. So, you know, all of these stories kind of often come about because you're doing the best you can, you're making things happen, you're rolling along, and then something crazy happens, and it's like you start to MacGyver it. You know, because that's what you've got. So I just think it's interesting. And so I was going to ask, have there been any stories you can think of where you kind of ended up with lemons and turned them into lemonades? You know, something that came along and you're like, oh wow, how am I going to fix this?
There was a
And it came
story.
into some interesting things.
I wasn't there in town at the time where there was a convention going on in Houston. And supposedly, very close to the time that it was supposed to be held, the hotel, as they sometimes do, weaseled and refused to allow them the room space. And so they quickly shifted it over to a vacant Kroger supermarket. KrogerCon, they called it. I had not heard, I wasn't at that convention.
Wait a minute, you're not talking about the Count of Wrath?
No, KrogerCon.
Okay.
I was supposed to go help Carol move things.
Did you hear about that? Didn't Brad ever tell you about
That's like
KrogerCon?
Yeah.
Yes. But, I mean, mostly you do not expect to do anything but break even at the strictly fan cons, and you hope so. Although I have heard back in the day when you have, college students say, hey, let's put on a con. In some cases, they end up, selling muffins for months after that to make up for the money lost, and that is still more humorous than stories you hear with the big conventions that are bringing in a lot of the actor guests. There was recently a case of that in Houston where they brought in a lot of the Sons of Anarchy, which turned out to be a terrible mistake because they showed up with a large entourage and even large, which caused an even larger barbell. And then apparently they were, trying to, in fact, did manage to bully various people to give them money straight out of the cash box, with the result that convention is probably bankrupt and gone. But
Yeah, unfortunately, there are definitely stories of conventions that are run poorly. But you guys have some other fun stories you want to share us.
Well, a couple years ago, MileHiCon, with the costume contest, I had my 3 judges lined up, tried to do all that early, contact them, this and that and the other, everything, get all my ducks in a row, because it's, I mean, my theory is, before the convention, chaos, and planning, plan, chaos, so that you can get to the convention and go, all right, okay, and you're not trying to put out large fires when these other smaller ones come up, or larger ones come up. So I had all my judges in a row, and just before the convention, I get an email from one of my judges, I can't come. Okay, fine. No problem, thanks. Thank you very much. Maybe we can do this, this is somebody who regularly comes to the convention, we can do this next year. And I go to my next person down the list, can you, blah, blah, blah. Sure! And then I get another email, I'm sorry, but I got invited to dinner with George, the George. So I really am gonna bow. I'm like, okay, fine, that's fine. So I go down to my next person, like, can you, blah, 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 blah. Yeah, I can do that. Oh, good. And then I get another email. Well, I'm sorry. I know I said I could, but I really can't. Sorry. And, okay. And then the Saturday afternoon, my very last original judge had to bow out due to family emergency, was having to leave the convention. And I'm like, okay. it's like 3 hours before I want my judges to show up, and okay, I will handle this. Rose, how'd you like to be a judge at the costume contest? It's like, who do I know? Rose. But it's one of those lessons too when you're running the conventions, like plan B is a good thing, plan C is a good thing, plan D is a good thing. And it's, have the elephants that go all the way down.
It's all
Elephants, all as far down as you can get elephants to go is a good thing.
It's better when it's turtles.
Yeah, so that was kind of like, okay, so next on the list.
Dan, you got one?
Yeah, the hardest thing, even a small convention is a huge undertaking. There's so many pieces, there's so many moving pieces and things that have to be coordinated. But the very best thing you can find is to find someone who is deeply passionate about something that you could not give a single crap about. When I was working in Nikkei, we had, as many conventions do, we had the dealer's room, and then we had what they call the artist's alley, which was the lower priced tables for individual artists as opposed to someone running a business. And for a while they were kind of glommed together, but they weren't even in the same physical space. So we had the people running the dealer's room trying to run the dealer's room, and then we had a team that ran the dealer's room and basically ignored the artist's alley, which made for a great big mess. But the best thing to find is someone who comes up and says, well, I had some thoughts on how to do Artist's Alley. And Amanda and I look at each other, and in my head I was like, you're hired. Go, 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 go. But what's great about that is that the people that are passionate about Artist's Alley, for some dang reason, they're going to do all that work for you.
Yeah.
And they're going to make it the best that they can. And all you have to do is sit back and go, yes, Artist's Alley was great this year. Great Artist's Alley, good job there. And certainly point out the person that did all the work. But for me, that was the biggest pleasurable surprise, is to find someone, and we're sitting here thinking, God, what are we going to do about this? What are we going to do about this area? We don't know what to do, we don't know what to do, and then suddenly someone who cares comes along, oh, thank goodness for that person.
This is how I got the job at San Jose WorldCon.
That reminds me of what your father once said to me, Dan. And he said, when people come up and say, I have an idea of how it ought to be, and I said, that's a very good idea. Now, why don't you do that?
Yeah, good idea, you're in charge.
And go.
Go, go, go.
I kind of had something that was the opposite of that. The very first Miss Legends Con, there was a pair of rooms that I had that were kind of far away from the rest of the rooms, and I was trying to figure out what to do with them. And I had someone who came to me and said, oh, well, I'll do some kids programming, and she was going to contact, Michael's and get some craft supplies and just create a whole kids programming track, so that way, all the activity could be happening in the main part of the con, and then parents with the kids could kind of wander off back there and just kind of let them roam free and do, and have fun back there. And partway through, she ended up having to drop out. And I'm like, well, I don't want to run kids programming. I have children. I want to do that for fun, too. And I couldn't find a replacement. So what I ended up doing is we, through a process of various things, came up with some people who wanted to do some crafts that people could take home, some make and takes. And so we ended up with like a chainmail panel and some various things that happened in that room. And they turned out to be really, really popular. And they've actually become kind of one of the cornerstones of what we do at the con now.
Does it still involve kids, or do they get pushed out?
So the convention was always about getting adults a place to get together, because kids have a lot of places where they can get together and talk about Harry Potter and talk about the things that they love, but there's not a place for adults to do that, or there wasn't, and so that's what I was trying to create. So we still, kids are welcome, but they're not as likely to want to sit through a panel on, the weather of Westeros. They're welcome to come, they just might be bored. So we try to make all of our programming all ages, so, if it's something like chainmail, then yeah, they're totally welcome to come, and so are the adults. Things like that. So one of the things I was also that mentions in the thing is maybe a heartwarming story that maybe, or maybe as I like to call this, why do we do this?
Well, my most personal heartwarming story is I met my husband at the convention. It was my very first MileHiCon, and I walked into the art show and was talking to the art show people, and I met my husband, which is,
Was he also volunteering?
Yes, he also works the art show at MileHiCon.
It does seem like we connect with our own, like.
Yeah, it's, it's like eHarmony can go,
But an econ.
yeah, we're fandom meets sort of. But I think in some ways that is a very heartwarming thing, because I have seen several weddings at conventions, and they have them at the conventions because it's a special place for them both.
And you've already paid for the hotel.
It's a wedding and honeymoon all rolled up in one Spanish weekend.
And everybody you know and like is already there.
Yeah.
And everyone is already pre-prepared to expect a really chintzy buffet.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
But let's face it, not everyone's in costume already.
There you go.
Yeah, and I've seen several weddings, and it just I think it's really nice because it is something that they obviously share a lot of. So.
Yeah, the question of why do you do this, I think there's a lot of answers for that. A few years ago I could have told you more. I've been out of running conventions for a very long time, but you do it because you want to make that space. Just like Nikki was saying, you want to make that space where people can come together and celebrate this, enjoy this, discuss this, share this, meet the kindred people. And I've seen a whole lot of relationships blossom into marriages in the course of working conventions. And I think in a lot of ways it comes down to the individual. Everybody's going to have their own reasons, but we're all kind of tied together in the idea that this is where we want to be. This is what we want to have, all the time, maybe, without the work, ideally. But this is the environment that we want to be in. And so spending the time to create that environment and to invite others to that environment, I think is the primary.
But I think it also feeds back to what you said about finding people to work in. It's somebody has a passion for doing the masquerade, doing the makerspace, and they're like, yeah, sure, I'll do that because they have a vested interest in making the space, and that's when somebody says, okay, fine, go.
Well, I also think it becomes a playground for a lot of creativity that you don't necessarily see in your daily lives. Like when you guys go to work on perhaps Monday, you're not going to have conversations like this probably happening at work, or any of the other things that you might be going to see today. And you're not going to be going to like a masquerade at work and go, wow, lovely costume.
Would somebody be willing to go over there and see if they have an empty or rather a full water pitcher?
Yeah.
Because we're drinking it all. We're two-fisted drinkers.
It's a little warm again.
Rest of Rosenwald.
Are there any questions from you guys that we haven't actually answered, or any interesting stories that you may have heard of that we haven't touched on? Yes.
So I was actually at that WorldCon panel that you mentioned.
Oh, you were. Did I describe it accurately enough?
Yeah, so.
Okay, thank you. Because I was not. I was at the convention, but not the panel.
So I actually published a magazine called Compelling Science Fiction, and one of our authors, Rich Larson, was in the back. I had given him a t-shirt, and everybody was so focused on the panel and booing and carrying on. He took off his shirt and put mine on, and nobody even paid attention. Anyway, I actually did have a question, which was, what is the best way to get involved in panels?
Talk to programming.
Yeah, most convention websites will have, assuming they're well set up.
Yeah.
Do you mean being panelists?
Yes.
Yeah, have a
Let me
contact.
go talk to Russ.
You have is like contact us,
Yeah.
or a programming thing, or a FAQ. Well, WorldCon does the same thing around January. They usually put out a call for submissions on panel ideas and panelists. And you basically write in and go, this is who I am, this is what I do, this is what I like to talk about. Here's some ideas. And a lot of times, especially with the WorldCon or with a larger convention, if you can give them some panel ideas that revolve around what you do or whatever, then that's a good thing too. Because if they, they sort of feed back into each other as they're trying to construct a schedule.
Yeah, as a con organizer, like I want to have great panels and I want to have great panelists. So I kind of need to know, why do you think you would be great at my convention if you're pitching to me? You know, and why do you think you would fit in there? Like, what is it that you love about this that you see at my convention that fits really well together? And then also, yeah, and also if you have any ideas, that's really cool, because even a smaller convention, we're always looking for new and fresh things, because we all talk to each other, we all know each other in the local community, and so we end up seeing a lot of the same panels from one con to another, because those are the kinds of things we like to talk about. But it's great to have somebody come in and say, hey, you know, I love Harry Potter, and I would love to talk about McGonagall and like her rise to fame. Sweet, let's do it, you know?
Well, I'm an out-of-towner. I don't know who you are, but you are.
My name is Joe Steck. This is actually the first MileHiCon I've been to.
Well.
Great, yes, welcome.
Thank you.
I mean, you know, the thing is, most fans are willing to pontificate almost indefinitely, but especially if there's something that you know or can fake knowing, that's always good. Knowing is better, but being able to speak fluently about something you don't know will do.
Also, I think if you can bring other panelists with you. So I pitched an idea to Nikki about doing a panel on writing sex scenes. So I brought a romance writer with me. And we did a late night adult only panel on writing sex scenes in any genre.
That was great, yeah. So that's really what it is. Just find the websites of the cons that you want to do programming at, send an email to somebody, and pitch them yourself.
Okay.
Or in this case, I mean, you just saw Rose. She was standing right here.
She still didn't want you to email
She
it.
will be wandering around here for the rest, and just go to her and say, you want to you know, be on panels, because, I mean, she'll get that slitty look on her face and say, how can I use this one? Okay, so she will probably not say, do not bother me. She will say, oh, you know, she will say something. But
I will warn you that going up to her during the convention, you're going to register as a Misty Haze when she thinks about it later. So write something down, or have her write something down. Because people would come up to me all the time, indicating I'm shaking hands, and people wanted to take pictures of me for some reason. And I was like, yeah, absolutely, yeah. And then go on to the next emergency. I actually don't remember any of the dead dog parties, because that was Sunday night, and it was done, and the last of the energy was gone. And so I see footage of it, and I was like, when did I do that? How did I get those two on my lap? What was that? So.
And even better yet, give the Concom like a month to de-res.
Yeah.
Because it's a lot of buildup and a lot of buildup and a lot of planning, and then the weekend itself. The weekend itself, depending on who you are and what you're doing and that sort of thing, can be high stress, high active, and by the time you're done, you're just kind of, you fall over into bed, and it's like, all right, I don't want to think, talk, or whatever, anything about this for a month. And then I'll be ready to go again, but I need a month.
Oh yeah. The Monday after the con, I'm never doing this ever again. The next Monday, I'm good.
it's sort of like childbirth.
That's what I was going to say. I've been told that's kind of like childbirth. I'll never do it again.
Now
So,
that everybody has email, email is your friend, it leaves a paper trail.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And if you come up to me at a con and ask me something or tell me something, the chances are that even if I write it down, I will lose wherever I wrote it down on. But if you email it to me, it will be in my inbox.
Yeah.
And we have another question over here. Somebody had their hand up.
Are all hotels created equal?
No.
no.
And the next hour, we can talk about that.
Yeah. And all hotel staffs are not created equal.
True, and even year to year, they're not even the same.
Yeah.
Well, there are many exciting stories about things that happen at conventions that have to do with the hotels. But, you know, I mean, ultimately, in most cases, the hotel will see the science fiction convention or the media convention as being very low on the pecking orders. I think, you know, inside, con management biz, there are these stories about, and then they showed up and they had booked our art show space for a wedding.
There was there was the first year of, oh, what is that con called? I think it's called Anime Land Wasabi at this point. Yes, I know, I make the same noise. The first year, not only did they not have the whole hotel, they had the lobby entryway of the hotel and like a room up on the 6th floor. But they were sharing it with a cat fanciers convention. So you have people dressed up in large, bizarre anime costumes. Yes, me too. And then these ladies walking around with a cat carrier in one hand and a litter box in the other. Walking around going, looking at these strange people walking through here.
Especially the cat girls.
Yeah, oh, good grief. So, yeah, that can be very
You would
exciting.
think it would work perfectly, but it didn't.
Yeah, two illustrations. First of all, there's the convention, there's who you're sharing your hotel with, if anybody. I mean, a lot of times the best thing is if you don't have to share it with anybody. But if you can build a relationship with that hotel over time, they figure out you're weird, but you're general, well-behaved, and you pay us, and you pay us money. So having a good relationship with whatever hotel is a really good thing. Years ago, there was a convention that shared a hotel with a bridge club convention thing. So all these little old blue-haired ladies, sort of thing, from the bridge convention, were watching everybody in their fantasy sci-fi best move through the hotel with them. And this guy gets on an elevator, and he's dressed mundanely. One of the ladies says, "Are you with these strange people?" And he looked at her and he said, "No, ma'am, I've never played bridge in my life." But the other thing in terms of hotel, you have to look at the confirmation of the hotel. Because some of the worst things I've ever heard, I believe it was a hotel in Baltimore that was doing, was it a old Balticon hotel, or was it a Star Trek convention hotel? It's 2 towers. The only connection between these 2 towers was the ground floor, and this was a couple thousand person convention. And I think there were only 2 or 3 elevators. You had to basically go down, go across, go up, go down, go across, go up. Basically, the entire convention was held in the elevator lobbies because nobody could get anywhere. So if you're thinking about running a convention and you want to try,
check your sanity.
But hotel confirmation can. The physical layout of the hotel itself can make or break a convention. So it's not just the relationship you have with them,
And it's funny too, because you'll be working with a salesperson sometimes who's not necessarily the person who you're working with during the convention or leading up to the convention. Sometimes it is, sometimes it's not. It really depends on how they structure their management and their sales and everything. So sometimes you'll be talking to one person and you're like, yeah, and we'd love to do this and we'd love to do that. And they're like, yeah, we totally do that. And then so you sign the contract, but none of that was actually in the contract. And then, oh no, that guy's fired or doesn't work there anymore or is in another hotel. Now you're dealing with a different person. You're like, and those things we talked about. And they're like, I don't know what you're talking about.
You are hosed.
So you have to be very,
They're not bound.
They don't.
And even if it is in the contract, they will probably, there are some convention hotels will look at you and say, well, is he lawyered up or not?
Yeah, getting a good relationship with a hotel is actually, I mean, like there's hotels there's times when I'm like, maybe I'll never leave there because they're easier to work with than one hotel I worked with that we sat down to settle up and I felt like I'd walked into some, corporate espionage or something. Like they were like this, and I was like, where are you getting this stuff? They were very hostile. I mean, almost to the point where some of us walked. I mean, it was crazy.
Run by the mob sort of thing.
It was bizarre. We're not there again. So yes, you had a question.
Do you usually find you have enough volunteers?
Never.
Rarely.
Never.
Never, ever. Plus, you got people that volunteer, that say they're going to show up, and about a third of them will actually come.
It varies.
It varies from con to con.
Yeah, it varies from con to con. We have about probably a 2/3 to 3/4 of our volunteers show up.
Yeah.
It is not possible to overestimate the amount of labor that you can use.
Yeah, I've never had a convention where we had too many people.
And over time, you might find that you have a very small, very dedicated core of volunteers that you can assign finicky detail, whatever the tasks to, and then you have all the other volunteers to do things like door checking or can you?
The fun timekeeping.
Yeah, that's
So speaking of, it is
it. I
time.
didn't hear no ding.
So it was a silent ding.
It's a silent day.
So thank you all very much for coming, and feel free to catch any of us outside of here to answer any questions we didn't get to today. Thank you.
Thanks.